Hey there, welcome to the archives. So, just a few things. Before I get into this blog, this one is called Transnational Feminism. I wanted to put it out there that right now, within my capacity, I'm mostly just talking about it. There are others who are actually doing the work, who are actually about it. So this post is more so to amplify them, based on it's taking everything out of me not to get into my own personal life right now. Um, but I'm not. If if you follow me at all, you know that I'm not actually in community A, or doing much of feminist activism. Or I'm not an organizer. I'm not an activist, and I am not even really teaching right now or doing any sort of movement work. So really, I'm just putting out the education, talking mostly about it. There are, like I said, there are folks who are actually not just talking about it, but who are on the ground doing the work. So this is more so to amplify their voices and direct you to what the different articulations of feminism looks like. Because I saw a tweet earlier on this week from a black woman of African descent. I don't know who she is, um, but her tweet said something along the lines of how she loathes feminists and all that we stand for, or all that they stand for. And I thought this was a pretty bold statement coming from someone who can even get online to tweet, because of the labor of Black and other feminists who paved the way for her and folks like me to live as freely as we do, right? It's one thing for men to be misinformed, that I get to a certain extent, especially because feminism is what tends to be blamed for pinning men and women against each other. So it does make sense to a certain extent that men will think that feminism is the problem. But I always forget that these types of men also love and find women who have and share like minded opinions. Um, and again, everyone is entitled to their own opinions. Like, who am I to judge? But at the same time, I think sometimes it can be really misinformed. Um, I wanted to ask her what her definition of feminism was, because it seems that maybe she's been misinformed, or what she's heard about it she doesn't like, or has grown up with this idea that feminism is feminism rather than feminisms, in the plural and multiple, because there are a lot of different articulations of feminism. Globally, people identify in different ways, people engage in it in different ways. Like I said, I'm not really doing a whole lot of actual feminist work at this moment, other than putting out these blogs, which to a lot of people is not even work, right? It's like you're doing it for fun. This is my way of translating some of my PhD dissertation. So I don't see myself actually um, working to publish it in any real way. Um, while others are, I'm going to address some of them later, but there are folks who are on the ground. Like, I can think of someone I grew up with, Dr. Rita Nketia, for instance, doing amazing work on the African continent in Ghana as well as here, that's actually doing the work, right? Folks like that will look at me and be like, she thinks she's a feminist. She's like out there, but she's not really doing anything. Yeah, you're right. I don't have the capacity. If you know exactly what's been going on the last few years, um, that's not my lane, right? I At this moment, I'm gonna stay in my lane, which is online at the moment. Um, Connecting with folks is very difficult at the moment, and so there's a lot of things that I need to do, um, financially, mentally, emotionally, to get myself in a different place to be able to be back on the ground. Uh, since I started my PhD, I haven't really been engaged in any sort of organizing or activism. I've never really been an organizer. I'm the girl that usually will just show up to a protest, um, amplify amplify people's voices online, share the articles, get the knowledge out, do more of the research and the readings myself. But all to say is there are so many different articulations of feminism. Some of them contradict. There are serial feminists who are really for um, imprisoning folks and think that the prison culture is something that we should uphold. There are abolitionists who think that absolutely not. We need to do away with it. There are so many different ways that people are doing it. So that's what I wanted to ask this young person is like, when you think of feminism that you like abhor or loathe, what exactly about it is it that you don't agree with or don't like? Because, and again, would you say that about like Black civil rights activists? Would you say that you loathe what Black civil rights activists have stood for? Because a lot of those activists were feminists at the forefront, including some of the men, right? I know that Malcolm X has his fair share of sexist moments, like most of us, but Malcolm X championed for women so much so that he put his life and career on the line to defend those young women that he believed were being taken advantage of, right? Martin Luther King Jr. Did the same. Like, these folks weren't just advancing for Black men, but also for Black people, for the Black family, for Black women, for Black children. And so others have called Stuart Hall a feminist, for instance. There are so many different people who have been advancing not just men, and not just women either, but for whole entire communities. And so if you think that women deserve better than just playing second fiddle, then it's very likely that you have some sort of feminist principles in you, and it's okay to say that. The issue, like I said in the other previous blogs, is the name itself, right? That we might be taking issue with because of where it's rooted, where it came out of, who's been doing it, how they've been doing it, and so we might cast the term away. That's okay. I've done that as well too. I will do that. I'm not always aligned with the term feminism all the time, especially when Black is not before it. So that is not necessarily the issue. The work that's being done, though, right? If you do believe that women and girls deserve to have equal pay or be equal, or deserve equity, then at some point you can say, I don't mess with the word, but what is being done is something that I do agree with. I do champion for women's work. And a lot of us are able to move as freely as we do because of the work of feminists, men and women, right? So sociologist Manisha Desai indicated that in the 19th century, women in Europe and the United States had already begun organizing around abolition of slavery. So this points to a key component of feminism, which is solidarity. Solidarity is a term that is really large, it's very broad, it's contested. For some, it's even elusive, right? How do you define exactly what solidarity is? What does it look like? There's so many different articulations. So feminist solidarity is very interdisciplinary. It crosses an array of topics and issues. How feminists show up for each other is really vast. Feminist solidarity looks like many things to different people. A lot of disability folks in the community will say that solidarity looks like online organizing because they're not able to get out to protest. That's not to say that disabled people aren't on the front lines of protests either, right? But for some people, they really push for online activism because that is where they primarily do their organizing. That is primarily where they do their activism, is online, because they might have mobility issues. They might be living with mental wellness stuff, chronic pain, chronic illness that doesn't allow them to be able to do the certain types of work. Other people, most of their organizing and their activism might come because of their day work, right? So you could show up to work daily and do the organizing and do the activism and then go home and have that kind of rest. Whereas some people, are doing work that's outside of that. Feminists have called it the triple day work, triple duty work, where folks are going to their 9 to 5s, they're doing that, they're coming home as mothers, they're taking care of their homes, they're cooking, they're cleaning, they're parenting their children, and then they're also activists in the community, making sure that they're taking care of other people in their community. In Latin America, when I was doing some of the feminist solidarity work, and they have kitchens where folks will, like soup kitchens here, where women will do all of the other work. They'll work 9 to 5, take care of their kids, but then they're also going out and feeding the community, right? They're doing awareness. They're handing out condoms. They are feeding people, like I said. They're educating people. They're making sure that homeless have somewhere to stay, food to eat, close to wear. There's so many different types of what solidarity looks like, right? And so Some focus less on the divisions that emerge when mobilizing, and instead they place emphasis on coalition building. Others have suggested that solidarity emerges when groups of people come together in alliances to defend and protect each other through unions or as part of political activities such as protests. We saw a lot of protests. Protests have been going on for decades, but 2020 in particular, a lot of people will say protests coming out of 2020 after George Floyd was murdered. David Featherstone has argued that organizing within labor movements, for example, may be contained within a nation state, but often solidarity flows across and transcends borders, right? It is, as is the case with transnational feminism, it's not just somebody in Canada working specifically within your local region, right? Maybe they're also connecting with folks in other provinces, in the United States, across to the UK, other parts of Europe, as well as Africa, maybe India, the Pacific. It crosses borders, not just located solely within the local or even, the national, but international, transnational. So in Solidarity of Strangers, feminist theorist Jodi Dean argued that at least 3 individuals are needed to form solidarity. So Jodi Dean says, I ask you to stand by me over and against a third. So for Jodi Dean, she herself recognizes that this articulation of solidarity reveals some of feminism's more paradoxical nature, right? The very use of over and against suggests that solidarity requires that we oppose something or someone in the name of solidarity. So this opposition could be against patriarchy, racism, capitalism, heterosexism, amongst like a whole host of different isms. But sometimes this can also include other feminists, right? Something I'm dealing with right now in my own personal life is like accountability and being called to be accountable for some of my own previous actions and transgressions. That is also a form of solidarity. For folks to call me in or out and say like, hey, sis, this is what you're saying that you're about. Are you actually about this? Right? That is a form of solidarity. Even though you might be opposing me, and it's okay to oppose folks, right? Opposition could be really generative, especially if it's for the cause of advancing the community, uplifting the movement. And so some of these tensions, of course, are felt and they have been exhibited in early feminisms, as I discussed a few blogs ago. So transnational feminist scholars like Myra Marks Ferry, Mary Tripp, Vera Mackey, Valentine Moghadam, they all center their feminist work on human rights. Folks will look at the UN or NGOization, so this idea that sometimes we focus too much on the NGOs and the UN, who typically have money, and we leave out a lot of grassroots activists, right? They're really calling attention to what they call NGOization and saying, how come the NGOs are getting all of the funding? Why is it the UN that gets centered? What about some of these local movements that often get left out? Sonia Alvarez, Nancy Naples, they question hierarchies within social movements and why those who are privileged and have power, like feminists located in the West and the UN and larger NGOs, they ask like, why is it them that tends to exert power over grassroots movements and folks in the global South, like I just said. Miley Blackwell weaves Indigenous voices into larger spaces, such as the UN, where they have been historically left out and excluded. Sarah Dempsey, Patricia Parker, Kathleen J. Crone, Lindy Hewitt, Sarah Mahler, Patricia Pesser. These are some of the folks that I was reading about and learning from when I was doing my dissertation on feminist solidarity. So these are some of the academics that are broadening definitions of feminism to include identity and place-based politics as well as postmodernism. Then you have folks like Chandra Mohanty, Virginia Vargas, Mary Hawksworth, like I said, Nancy Naples, Manisha Desai. They've all illustrated from feminism how feminism should involve a critique of the nation state, nation building, globalization, colonialism, imperialism, and capitalism. Chandra Mohanty, Amrita Basu in particular, they've taken interest in addressing globalization and anti-capitalism. You have folks like Valentine Mogatam, who does the same with issues of development, Alicia Hovorka, Meredith Abarca, Carolyn Sachs. Those are some of the folks I was learning from who address women's rights in relation to food sovereignty and food insecurity. So these are some of the different articulations of feminism, right? Everybody has their kind of lane, their niche, their area that they're into, that they're working to advance women. Like I said, others are doing abortion work, right? Especially right now in the States, mobilizing around that, mobilizing around trans activism. People are doing the work, especially in Florida right now, around the critical race theory bans, say no to gay. There are so many different people, like I said, actually on the ground, on the front lines, doing the work, putting their lives at risk. Most of them are not paid enough for the work that they do. And there are also folks in the global south, quote unquote, in places like Ghana, for instance. Like I said, Rita's been really involved in a lot of the work around the ban, the LGBTQ ban in Ghana. A lot of African feminists have African Development Fund. Here I've been, so full disclosure, I'm mostly taking advantage of feminist organizations and looking to them for their services, like I said, to help me get back on my feet, but rather than like working for them or with them. So Women at the Center, somebody that I've been getting support from. In Brave is somebody I've been getting support from. There is the Auto Rape Crisis Center that I recently sat on their advisory board. But again, only that because community was able to connect me with those spaces. So it's really hard to do the work when you're not in community. But I hope people are saying that everywhere. And that's something that is a drawback for me at the moment. But there are so many people who are in their communities, doing the work, sending out the emails, making the calls to politicians, feeding people, making sure that folks have clothes, they're doing clothing drives, they're sharing resources, they're going to the different political sites and advocating, talking to politicians. Solidarity looks like so many different things across so many different borders. That can be online, face-to-face, pandemic activism. There is no one singular thing. If you believe that feminism is still monolith, it's not. You're mistaken. There are so many different types of feminisms globally. They do all sorts of work, food sovereignty, making sure that food people are have access to clean water, movements, the Greenbelt movement in Kenya, rural movements, peasant movements in India. There's so many different types of transnational feminist organizing. So that's what I wanted to do here for this episode. I think this will be the last one. This is 4. There's another one I wanted to do on the implications of feminism, but I'm going to leave that right now. Maybe next week I'll do that for the next week's blog, but for right now, I'm just going to focus on getting myself together. I have some things. I have a job application and interview that I have to prepare for. So that's what I'm doing over here, as well as fighting my own internal battles and demons and getting supports and stuff. But I wanted to present the different types of transnational feminist solidarity that's going on. Okay, so I'm going to end it here. Please like, subscribe, and share. And until next time, in solidarity. Even though I'm not actually in solidarity, but you know what I mean.